back to Maya real quick. This is I did skim over this. So we talked about how, you know, you can take a so I have a surface here, just a Arnold's shader here, right? And then I plugged a file in here, and I'm sure you guys noticed as we went along, when I select file, I get this node too, right? So Maya is smart enough to add this node when you select, when you plug in, sort of using these checkerboard dealies here, right? That whenever you can plug something in this way, you know how you can wire things up, but you can also sort of bring up a chooser, okay? Anyways, Maya knows if I mean to put a file, meaning an image file, in here, you're going to need one of these, right? So this node just tells the file node how to place a 2D texture, right? And if you zoom in here, you see out UVs, right? So all that's doing is asking the object that you're applying it to, how are the UVs set up, right? And that's what we've been doing, you know, like on a lot of different objects for a while. It says, you know, how do I apply these UVs? And then it passes that on to the node that calls the texture, right? And this, right now I'm using the TV knobs texture from Monday, and then it just, you know, then it pushes it into the base color here, right? So the thing to notice about these is that there's sort of two things to be aware of here, in that if you create, say if I grab any of these 2D textures, like any of these, and just drag them in there, right? Like if I do the same thing, well, that one does, sorry, not the file. But if I take Arnold's texture image caller, notice it doesn't come along with its own UV coordinate node, right? So you have to do that yourself for some of these nodes. So, you know, the 2D texture, so these two are somewhat interchangeable in that this is the one that Maya provides, and then this is the one that Arnold provides, and it's going to have, once again, a few other little tricks and things that it can do. You can use either one. You know, at this stage, it really doesn't much matter. So, you know, you could use that, but the thing is you have to remember that with a 2D texture, you have to tell Maya how you want that applied, and you get that out of one of these, a 2D texture node, right? So, you know, all I would have to do is essentially, you know, make sure that the UV coordinates got plugged into here too, and it would use, you know, it would use this same node and apply it using the Arnold image node, right? So I could you know, push to the or point to the exact same thing, and I could get essentially the same thing. I have to make sure that I'm using one of these. So if you ever get a texture that, you know, you plugged it in, you're sort of, you know, trying to use it, but it's not working, sometimes you've lost your 2D texture node, or it didn't come along with it. So if we go into these, let's see which ones do it. So Fractal does it. See, Grid did too. Some of the old Maya ones are gonna do it properly, so you don't have to worry about it too much, but it's just something that can get either broken or not come along, right? So I'm going to delete all these except for this top one here. So the other thing to remember about the 2D texture node is that it has some options that can be really handy, sort of, you know, for sort of tricks up its sleeve, in that, you know, not only does it ask the object that you've applied the surface to what its texture coordinates are, it also can manipulate how the file should work when applied to the object, if that makes sense. Meaning, some of the things that you can do is, you know, if for some reason this isn't quite right, rotation wise, instead of having to open Photoshop and mess with it or whatever, you can actually rotate it, okay, in the frame. So, you know, say you brought it in and it's not mapping correctly or something, you put it 90 degrees, you know, say the mapping was set up 90 degrees. Well, instead of, like I said, either changing your mapping or changing the actual file, you just right here, you can quickly rotate it, right? The other thing you can do is, you know, if like in this wood texture that I was playing with, okay, bring it down here, and okay, so with the wood is another good example, in that when you bring something in that's maybe, you know, the sort of scaling looks wrong, in that, like if I applied this to the, you know, when I applied this to the table, it looks okay, but it kind of makes the table look small because the wood grain is so huge, right? Well, what you can do with that is you can you can repeat the texture. Generally, you want this to be a repeatable texture, so this is kind of a bad example, but so if I said 3 by 3, that's going to give me in the same space 3 copies of the image to place onto an object. Now, like I said, you'll see on here that it doesn't look right, but there are ways to make textures so that they are repeatable, so that you don't have this problem, right? In fact, this one's like a really bad one that's got kind of a shade on it or whatever. So this one would be even tough to you know, there are ways around this, but not in you know, Maya is not going to fix this, right? So, you know, these are the kind of things that you can do. You can like I said, you can repeat. You can even go in the opposite direction. If the thing is too big, you can say, just give me 0.5 of that, and it'll actually sort of zoom in on it, okay? So you'll see if I if I change it, okay, there we go. I'm scaling it up and down. So if I say 0.25, that's basically zooming into the middle corner, or the middle square of this thing, right? So here's the whole texture. 1 by 1 would be the whole thing, but when I said 25%, it's like it's just showing me the inside here. So you know, there's ways to you know, do some real quick things with the place 2D texture things so that you don't have to, you know, manipulate your textures in another program like Photoshop or something like that. Just kind of quickly get this done. It even has a little thing for messing things up. So this noise down here. So if I turn, so it says noise UV. So it's created this crazy, really crazy mess. 0.05. So if that's, you know, if you needed more sort of, you know, if your texture came in and it's a little too clean for you, you could pop that on there. There's just, like I said, there's just a bunch of tricks. You don't need to mess with that too much. Wrap just allows you to sometimes, but the default is when an object is repeated on a surface. But the default is it's you can sort of think of it as wallpaper. There we go. Wallpaper, in that it's just going to repeat all the way in every direction, okay? Even though it's not showing me that here, like if I put this on an object, it's going to repeat and repeat. Sometimes you don't want that. Like if you're, an example would be if you're putting like I was saying before, like a decal on the side of a truck or something like that. Even though you don't want it to fill the whole side of the truck, you want it just to be, you know, whatever, in a corner or something. By default, it would repeat all over the truck. If you turn wrap off, it'll put it on there only once and not repeat across the entire surface, okay? So, you know, like I said, by default, it acts like wallpaper. If you turn on or off wrap, it will make that happen or not happen, okay? Mirror just allows you to mirror it in either direction, so it's going to flip it over. Why is it not flipping it? Well, mirror should flip things, flip as if you took the surface and flipped it this way, and V would flip it up and down, okay, just in case it's the same thing. If it's not, you know, you can rotate it, but you can also flip its axis too, if you all of a sudden got a texture that was in the wrong place, okay. Offset will allow you to actually sort of kind of crop it or sort of move it, okay. So this is actually where you can see the wrapping doing its thing. If I turn that off, what it's done is essentially slide the texture over in this sort of virtual space here, leaving nothing because I turned wrap off. If I turn wrap back on, you'll see it's done that. Okay, so I can offset in the other direction. So virtually, the texture is sort of right here. Okay. So you know, these are rare ones that you need to sort of. It's best to sort of just place it properly. I just wanted to show you that these things are there. So like I said, there's there's a lot of things that you can do with this if you run into a problem and you want to sort of make the texture adapt to your mesh versus make your mesh adapt to the texture. Sometimes this can save you a lot of time. I mean, generally the repeat is the one that you really want to mess with, because it's like if we were using if we brought in a noise, there we go, a noise, you know, by, let's see, solo this, there we go. So, you know, I have my noise, you know, and you see in here where I have certain wait, sorry. In the noise, I have certain parameters that I can mess with here, right? But if it was just too, like, not dense enough or something, like if I was going something really, really dense, this would be where you'd want to, repeat, okay? So that shrinks that down and shrinks it down, depending on what you're trying to do. It takes that, because those things aren't necessarily in the noise creation node. They're in the placing the UV coordinate texture node. Okay, so you can mess with those, and that's where you play with it a lot. Is just in the repeat. Like if you want more density, like if I now plug this into the object instead of that file and get rid of the bump and go back to a shader ball. Okay. See, so you see it placed on the object. So if I go with 1, I get that. If I go with 10, I get what? Oops. I get something that looks more like a a stipple or whatever you want to call it, like a a very fine texture, right? So that's where it's handy. Generally, that's really what you dig in here for, is to get at that repeat, so that you can do that sort of thing. Another way that it's the thing to keep in mind with these too is there's nothing stopping you from putting one number in one and one number in another. So for instance, with noise, a great way to create streaks is to repeat only in one direction a lot. So if I pump this up to 20 but minus 1. See, what I get out of it is streaks, because it's taking that. So what it looks like, if I come back there, it's taking that surface, okay? So here's 20, I'll just walk it down. So there it is as noise, and 15, so it's stretching it in one direction, 10, 5, 1, 0.5, 0.2, 0.1. So I'm sort of just making artificial streaks that then, when I put it on the object, so this plugs in really nicely to like brushing on, steel, like when we were trying to make that steel, stainless steel band of the watch or whatever. Like this is a way to create those kind of effects, and it's just taking what's there and sort of manipulating it to what you want out of it, So this noise, because you want it to be random, but that's really streaky. So you want it to be really random, but at the same time, you don't need this like a cloud out of it, like you're getting. There's, like I said, there's nothing stopping you from doing that and getting lines to put on stuff or whatever you might need, right? And you can do that with the grid. If you wanted, hard lines, you could throw the grid one in here, which gets you. So if you stretch the grid, you just get lines in one direction, but regular lines properly, that kind of thing. So the 2D texture node, now that we understand within reason, like what UV textures do, this is how they're controlled, when plugging them in. So like I said, they get information from the object, and then so the object tells this node how to put the texture on the object, then the place 2D texture node tells Maya what to do with it when applying it, if that makes any sense. So it's like, it's how to modify that texture to get it on the object. By default, it's just going to do one repeat of it, it's going to take that texture like this, show it once essentially, and wrap it on the object until you say to do something different. That's what it's going to do, and it's so it basically by default makes wallpaper, and until you say I want to do something different with it. I want to repeat it 5 times to make sort of more material out of it, or stretch it in one direction versus whatever the manipulation you want to do. That's what it's going to do. Okay. Does that make sense, everybody? Does that make decent sense? Hey, Tia, you jumped ahead. So today, what we're going to concentrate on is I made a little scene with a Lego dude. Okay. So we have our Lego guy. He has no mappings on him whatsoever. Okay, and so what we're going to do, the basic gist of the exercise is to set them up for UVs, do some painting, and sort of and set them up to be customized because there's no surfaces on there at all. So I'm going to walk through the basic, just the first couple of pieces, and then bop over to Mudbox to play with them, and then we can take it from there. Okay. All right. So you guys all should have Mudbox 2018. I do, so I think you all do. So you know, this can be done, and there's nothing stopping you from doing it in Photoshop as well as Mudbox if you don't have that at home. But I wouldn't be surprised if they have a free version of that too to pop on there. If not, like I said, Photoshop, or maybe you just got to come into a school to do this or whatever. So okay, so all the parts are named, you know, they're all separated, so they're ready to go. But what we're going to do here is we're going to make one decal sheet for the whole character, okay, so that, you know, it would be easy to make new sort of additions, or sort of, you know, new variants, I should say, right? And so instead of just making a surface for each piece, we're going to make multiple surfaces, but one texture, okay? Or, well, actually, we'll probably use just one surface because there's only one type here. So okay, so what I'm going to do is like I said, I'm going to unwrap the first couple of pieces and then leave it to you guys. So in the same area, there's some reference of, you know, how they customize these guys, right? And, you know, they're pretty simple. They're usually just printed from one direction. The rest of it's pretty clean. Okay. Oops. Yeah, they're, like I said, so sometimes they print on the arm, sometimes they print on the side, but usually it's either the back or the front, you know, so it's pretty simple from a decal standpoint, you know, and doesn't need to be, you know, insanely, you know, set up to be able to sort of paint every nook and cranny, you know. So anyway, so what I'm going to do is set it up so that, you know, when you do the unfold, remember we talked about how you end up getting, you know, polygons that are stretched and things like that, and which can cause a problem when you're, you know, trying to sort of project things, you know, directly on there and be able to trust the lines that you see, right? So to be able to set this up so that we can paint it also in Photoshop, we're not going to sort of do a lot of unfolding, but we're going to do, you know, unwrapping here. So I'm going to do the torso first, right? So so I'm in my UV editing workspace. I'm going to close this guy down. Okay, so, you know, when you look at this, it's essentially a box, right? So the easiest way to do this is this one that you know, projects from all faces, right? So it essentially, you know, just remember when I see if we can see it. Okay, so you can see where it put the seams because, like I said, it's essentially a box. Let me move it up a little bit. There we go. So you see all the little projection grids right here, or sort of yeah, projection planes, right? So it's projecting in this direction, projecting down, and, you know, yada yada yada, right? So that's great. That's what we want. But and you see here that, you know, we're not getting anything that looks, you know, everything's still, our lines are still straight. So if I drew a straight line here, you know, it would draw a straight line across the face. That means that I could sort of apply 2D art without a lot of work in trying to make it fit, okay, which you'll see when we get to that. So I'm just going to hit enter, okay, and I'm going to accept what I got. So what I end up with is, let me get my UV toolkit, okay. So I've got 6 pieces, right? So now we're going to try and lay it out so that, you know, we can start mapping it, okay. So this is our front, obviously. So I just select some faces, and that's the front of the guy, okay. So if I come over to the tools, there's lots of nice little tools in the UV toolkit to do this. So I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees so that the top, I'm going to go to face mode, so that, okay, so those are the two faces right there. I'm going to turn on the, there we go. So if I scale this out, you'll see, you know, what we're looking for is, you know, is squares on the from the test texture, and also, you know, text that's not all stretched in any direction here, okay? And that's what we're getting, and that's what we should be getting, okay? So I'm gonna shrink that back down. Now, so what I wanna do too here is so that I can paint all the way around, I'm gonna start sewing these guys together, okay? So I'm gonna grab edges, okay. Grab all the way down to here. Whoops. Grab here to there. Okay, and then it's going to show you. So this is this side is this side of the character, right? So all I got to do to get that to sew together is stitch together, right? And you see how it popped into place and it rotated so that we're not going to get distortion across here. So since it's sort of a trapezoid shape here, that's why it sort of goes up and around like that, okay? So now we're gonna sew the other side on there. Down. Go back to that. Okay. Okay, same thing. So we'll see here. Here's that next side right here, because it's showing you what are the two borders that are connected. Stitch together. Great. And then I'm gonna get the back. So I'll have something that wraps pretty much all the way around the body. There we go. Stitch together, and it moved. So when I go like so, that's the front face, okay? Wrap around, there's the back, okay? So then there's another piece that's gonna be along the bottom here, that's sort of way underneath there. But I'm mainly only gonna worry about making sure that I can paint up through the top here. So I'm going to find those edges, edge here, and it goes from there to here. Double click. Oops. Okay. Double click and stitch together. So now you see how it wraps up and into up. You know, to where the neck area is here. So if I wanted to paint up there, I can do that. Okay, so it's pretty much, you know, just unfolded like a box essentially, and I could do then I'll just take the bottom and I'll do the same thing just for consistency's sake. Okay, stitch together, and that puts that piece down there. This is odd because it, I don't know why it's scaled differently.
It was for me too.
Yeah,
but it didn't work. It worked fine when I chose the other, like the back side up top.
Huh. Yeah, it's kind of bizarre. This last piece sort of doesn't fit properly. Well, I'm just going to manually shrink it and put it into place. No, that's not right. What's going on here? Bear with me here. I think I may have one extra piece that's wrapped around, or the geometry is no. Well, since it's along the bottom, what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to take that shell, rotate it. Where's the rotate? And just put it pretty much in place and not worry too much about it. There we go. And it's too big for some reason. Oops. There we go. Okay, so we did that piece. Okay, so now, you know, like I said, you can see we have pretty much, you know, nice squares here so that we could paint without getting a lot of distortion in Photoshop. And, you know, since our lines are all still straight, you know, when I go in there, I know that this straight line is still this straight line on the body, right? And remember, when I do unfold, you know, unfold has its, you know, sort of has its own algorithm to try and, you know, uncover the UVs, right? So that it, you know, everything gets seen, right? So if I hit unfold here, see how it's kind of mushed it up a little bit, and you know, it's not too bad, but like, you know, some of these lines aren't necessarily perfectly straight anymore. I want to be able to trust that, so it's like if I was in Photoshop and I wanted to put a straight line of, you know, belt right across here, I could trust that, you know, that's where it's going, right? You know, as soon as things start to get you know, weird and kind of in the lines aren't necessarily straight anymore. You can't trust them, so that you can't paint in Photoshop, and that's not necessarily always a problem, because it's like if you said you're going to do everything in Mudbox, then you wouldn't have to worry about it so much. But it's just good practice for something that's a hard body situation like this, to keep things nice and straight like that. Okay. All right, so that's the body. I'm going to put it up over here. Now I'm going to move on to one of the arms here. Okay, so essentially this is a cone, so there's no reason to not use the cone mapper on there. So remember these green guys at the end of the poly, like I can go in here and I can get the same, they're all in here. Sorry, cylindrical mapping, not a cone, not a cone, but a cylinder. Sorry. So that's essentially what we have here. So that's going to be the sort of the best one for the job. So I just select my object and I hit cylindrical mapping, which gives me the cylinder gizmo, right? Okay. So you see that it's pointing the wrong direction. See how, I don't know if you can see it here or on your monitor, but like, see how there's a little gray cylinder here, as you might imagine. Okay, let me wrap it around so it looks like a cylinder. There we go. Okay, you see how it's shooting through the object. Okay, not the way that you want it to. See, so here's the cap at the end of the arm, which you can actually see when I come in here. There it goes. So that's the cap. So anyways, to get this guy into place, there's a little T right there. You see that guy? That changes your transform mode for the gizmo, right? So essentially, you'll see when I click it, now I get all the transform things, including rotate, right? So now I can rotate it into place so that it's traveling both down the object, and also I can control where the seam is at, because I want the seam to be hidden behind the object. And you see the white, so you see the white, there's my seam. There's a lot going on here, so I wouldn't be surprised if it's hard to look at. But so I'm going to continue to rotate it, oops, just a little bit so that it's going down the arm, because I'm trying to get it to not jump over here, and that's because it's rotated in one of these axes a little too much. So a little farther. You can kind of see what it's doing over here. All right. I'll just keep rotating a little more. No, that made it worse. Little T, there's this little doohickey here. They hide it at the bottom of the gizmo, right? And without it, you don't get any transform. All you get is like the ability to scale it and move it like this. When you hit T, you can scale it with your normal. You can scale it and move it with your normal tools. In fact, you get a kind of a super gizmo there that does everything. Like, see that there's move handles, there's scale handles, like so. Okay. So I'm gonna take what I got here. It's not the best, but it's not the worst thing I ever saw. So I'll hit enter and Q, just to get out of the tool. Now, so the only thing I gotta really correct here is that you see how I kind of have some stretched chunks at the some stretched faces at the end of the at the end of the arm, right? And that's these guys up here, because all it did was wrap them two-dimensionally in a cone. No, a cylinder. Why do I keep saying cone? A cylinder, not a freaking cone. Okay, so all you have to do is just make sure those are exposed. Now, in this instance, we could just hit unfold and see what it does, right? So you see how these faces right here, even though they're big, they're smushed here in the UV, right? So that means we have to fix, we have to find a way to, either fix this by hand or, live with it, which you don't want, because if you went to color this, see how the color is smearing through the object, right? So in this instance, I'm going to try unfold and see what it gives me, because I can always undo it. And so, okay. So what I created here, now you see this is a good example, is that, the lines are, if I wanted to paint something that goes, oh, these lines aren't straight. Well, if I wanted to paint something on the wrist here, my lines aren't exactly straight. So, if I wanted to sort of, you know, make this sort of a little cleaner, you know, it might be worth the time to go in here, find those edges, you know, which will, so I'm going to double click in the viewport. I'm going to come up here. I'm going to expose that edge. Okay, then I'm going to go like that. So I just scaled it down so that it's flat. So I'm going to grab the last bits. Oops. I'm going to go back out. I'm just going to isolate this object. Object mode, select. Control 1 to hide it. Okay, so there we go. So, I'm going to go back to edge. Grab that edge. So that's the start of the texture. So if I bring it up here, see how it's now like giving it some material by putting some, you know, instead of getting streaks, I'm getting some checkerboard here, right? So I'll scale it again, flatten it out, and just for cleanliness sake, I'll do all these, flatten them out. Okay. The thing about these though is they're not exactly flat, so these actually look fine. Like, see how this model is set up so that it can bend in the middle there, in the middle, to be like an elbow. So this actually looks decent. You see how the U and all that stuff is fairly clean. So what we're getting out of this is fairly accurate. So I'm actually not going to mess with these too much. Maybe bring this down. Oops. Maybe bring down this chunk just a tad because it's taking up maybe a little too much. UVs. Okay. There we go. So that's not too bad. Can ignore these. Let's see what's going on here. Okay. Oh, I see. So it's a little stretched out. So, you know, if you really want to get nuts, you could, you know, use your drag tool, drag and tweak to. So these are kind of not in line with the others. That's why it's sort of, I'm getting this sort of streaky weirdness here. There. So if I went and I corrected these so it's a nice grid, it's going to behave a little bit better. But like I said, it's, you know, it's kind of marginal. I mean, you know, especially for this, you know, you're probably just looking to color the, you know, color this a little bit. So one thing you'll see here too is we have UV's a little too checkerboard, a little too bunched up here. So I'm actually gonna what that means is that the space between there and the next the next UV is too much. So it's getting sort of, it's being allowed to use too much of the map because it's just this little chunk. So let's fix those. Whoop. All right. What am I doing here? I think maybe we got this whole chunk needs. There we go. So this is a little more uniform. So this is a little stretchy. So let's bring that all up a little bit. So you see how that makes the aspect of our, you know, our squares, you know, all pretty much square. Nothing's too stretchy. That'll behave better when we use it. Yeah, see, that's pretty good. Okay, so we could call this piece done, and just kind of shrink it down a bit and put it off to the side. So I'm gonna go back to object mode. Control 1 on my keyboard to get back the rest of the mesh. So I've got my two pieces done here. Okay, so when I select them, you'll actually see them both here. Okay, in the you know, the UV editor. Okay, which is really cool because, you know, these are two different objects, but we can just one second. We see the UVs. That means that we can allow these objects to share one map without, you know, and sort of arrange them without sort of having them all have to be together and then tear it apart. What's up?
I forget. Did you ever end up it's actually the bottom of the body for the rest of it, or you just like aligned it?
I just aligned it. Yeah, I just aligned it because, you know, it's kind of negligible, you know, where it sits. So I didn't, you know, I didn't bother with it too much. I mean, in this, I would probably go in, you know, because all you're seeing is these little bits. It would probably be smart to sort of just chip those pieces off and then make them at the end of each, so that each of these faces or these groups of faces, so that if you paint it, it would wrap nicely underneath there. you know, there's no reason for it to need to wrap completely under, you know, under the whole body. Okay. You know, we'll see when we jump into Mudbox, you'll see how it handles those seams, you know, which is really cool. Like you would think if you paint over here and then go off of the you know, if I painted, because you know, here's those faces, right? You would think that if I was painting up the side of this body here, right, and then painted into this, it would go nowhere, right? Well, Mudbox figures out that that texture should go from here, but then continue on here to its next set of faces here, right? So I can paint through here and get texture here and here, which is exactly what you would want. So we're, like I said, we'll see that in a second. Okay. So then I'm just gonna deal with the head, because you would do a lot of the same thing. You know, this is I would probably chunk this off into a few pieces, unwrap the inside separately from the outside, and then, you know, sort of try to find ways to sew that back together. Some of this is, there we go. Okay. But I'm just going to I'm going to do the head because it sort of has some little tricks in it, and we'll sort of figure out how to deal with those. So so the most important thing that you would do with the head is you know, put a face on it, right? So the thing that you know for sure have to nail is making sure that these, you know, these front faces are going to be mapped properly, right? So you know, even though you've got all these inside bits and all that stuff, you know, like I said, the thing that you really need to worry about is getting this main head part right. Okay, so it'd probably be best to do this in a couple of different stages. So what I'm going to do is grab grab a ring. So I'm going to actually just map the face separate so that we don't get stretching or anything like that in the face, and then deal with the other parts that are going to be a little less important in a second sort of phase, right? So I'm just growing my selection to the neck down to the neck, and then up to the head, or up to the you know, this little whatever Lego thingy, right? And this is essentially another cylinder. Okay, so I'm just gonna throw the cylinder gizmo on there, make sure that it wraps all the way around the object. I got a nice seam at the back of the head, which is a good place for it. Okay, and so I've got a bit of stretching here, so I'm gonna stretch it out so that my squares look about right, especially, like I said, on the face area. That's the big thing. Okay, we'll have to handle some pinching up at the top here. Okay, all right. So that's pretty good. So I'm gonna hit Q on my keyboard. We'll come back over here and see what we got. So this is our, you know, so this is our face. So, you know, you see here that these squares, you know, line up fairly decently with being slightly pulled faces. Let me go like this. So like I said, this is an aspect ratio you want to get just right, so that if you go to, like I said, if you go to paint this with a program that's not doing the you know, correction for you, like Photoshop, like I said, I could come in here and I could paint a face right on here, and it's going to map right, you know, right to where I want it to be, as long as these lines are still straight and everything like that. Okay, so this works out great. Okay, the only thing that's going to be a bit of a problem here is, you see, you do have some stretching. So if you wanted to, you know, get hair or whatever on there, you want to fix that up a little bit, right? So we're going to take this, that, and finally that, whoops, final edge that I can't seem to select. Cute. I'll come back for it. Okay, so so I'm just going to move these up into place and give them a little more. See, as I do it, see what you get there. So it's kind of just distributing those edges. Okay, maybe a little much. So I'll take this one, then this one, move those up until I get squares out of those. Close enough. Take that. Oop, take this last one, move it up until I get squares. Now I'm going to grab that top edge where my border is, move it up just a tiny bit because it's actually just that little piece inside there. Okay, and I could do the same thing for the bottom. I'm not going to bother with that right now, but you see the idea. You would go in and you know, just expose those pieces by hand, because if you hit unfold, it may give you something you don't like. Yeah, see, this is what unfold would do. So like I said, if I wanted to map a face on there, I have this distortion, right, that I would have to sort of deal with. So if it's going to be 3D painted, that's fine. If it's not necessarily going to be 3D painted, that's a big problem. So by keeping it perfectly square, we don't run into those kind of issues, okay? These guys right here. You mean this stuff? The checkerboard? Yep. Yeah. One of them throws it in the viewport. One of them shows it on the side with the UVs too. Okay. Okay. So now I just have two other pieces to deal with. I got the top and the bottom. Okay. So the top, I think what I'm going to do is, since in theory I probably would just color this and maybe put a little something on it, all I'm going to do here is I'm going to let's see here. I think I'll just deal with it. I'll just map it and then cut it up after the fact, right? Because we've sort of got all these extra little bits that you don't need to worry too much about. So I'm just gonna cylindrically map it, which gives me this. Okay. So you see, it's gonna stretch across the top and repeat. So that's fine. But then I'm gonna come in and I'm going to grab some faces, or sorry, some edges, just to put a seam, or it has a seam actually. So it has a seam there, but I'm going to cut this middle section out like so. Okay. So this little doodad in the middle will be its own piece. So say cut. We'll grab that shell. Damn it. So we'll grab the, let's see, find the shell. So, whoops. There we go. That's the main piece. Here's that inner piece, and I'm just going to say unfold and see what I get. Ooh, it disappeared. I think that's it right there. Yowzer. Let me see if I can sew it back together. Let's see. So yeah, this piece. So just grab those faces. So, you know, this thing being hidden in there, you know, once again, you don't need to give it too much care, but, you know, like I said, it's nice to not just disregard something. I'll have to come back to that piece. I'm not sure what's going on there. So, don't worry about that inner side. I think it might be because it's two-dimensional or something. Let's see. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. So I'm just going to concern myself with this top chunk for now, and I'll work that other part out later. So so here's our UV shell for the top. So once again, you see how it's, you know, since it's just a cone and it's projecting. Damn it! Did I say cone again? Please, for today, cone is synonymous with cylinder. Okay, sorry. So that means that, you know, it's only projecting, you know, towards the object and not wrapping around and inside. So even though we have checkerboards inside here, this is the same checkerboard that's going to be projected, you know, on this face is going to be the same one that's projected on this face. So, you know, just to get it right, we're not going to allow that, right? And so for this though, I'm going to, so that I don't have to hand undo this, I'm just going to do an unfold. Okay, so now we have a sort of a weird shape, but we're exposing all the faces here sort of correctly, right? So that means that this face, wherever it may be over here, isn't getting, in fact, we can see that. Let me shrink the whole thing down. Hold on. In fact, let me back up here. So this is before I unfolded it. I'm going to put it in there so that we can see. So you can see what's going on here. See how, like, part of it, see how it's smearing across the top and then mirroring on the inside. So see, this V is here, or, well, yeah, V is there, but it's also on the inside here, right? Now when I do that, instead, that V wraps in and around. Same with this U, right? So even though we have kind of a weird shape here, we're at least exposing all of the faces here so that we can paint on them all individually, and you know, they're all, once again, they're not wrapped around each other and things like that. So, you know, sometimes you don't need to bother, like if you're just going to color this top, that's fine or whatever, but in this, you know, for this exercise, we're going to actually deal with it so that you could paint this if you wanted to put some stuff up top there, right? So then the only thing we have to worry about now, go out to the rest of the thing, Control 1 to isolate it, is just this head nubby, or the neck nubby thing here. This should be pretty easy. Click, 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 there we go. Expand that shift with the period, like that, okay. Cylinder, make sure that the seam is going along with the rest of the seams, looks pretty good. And Q, and then there we go. So that looks pretty good to me, okay. And just find a place for it. I would definitely make this smaller. There's no reason for this to take up so much space in the UV, or in the, you know, in the map. So I'm going to shrink that down. So this is our face. It's really important. The top of the head, not so important.
Did you do another cylinder one for that?
Yeah, I did. Yep, I did another cylinder because it's essentially a cylinder, and I ignored any stretching that's going on at the bottom here because it's mainly just you know, in there. So ignoring this, whatever the hell's going on here, which I'm going to do for now. We're all set for the head, right? So I have my head, my body, and one of the arms all set up here, okay? So now all I need to do is just make sure that, you know, I'm using the amount. So you would do the rest of the body, which I'm not going to do here, okay? But imagine that I kept on and did the rest of the body. Now what I'm going to do is make sure I organize my map properly, right? So as you see, of course, you know, things are overlapping on each other. So that means if I painted right here, it's going to go on the top of the head and the body at the same time and everything. And, you know, we can't have that. That doesn't make any sense, right? So we're going to do a little hand layout so this is the main body, and we want to be able to paint on the face of the guy or the character, you know, with a lot of detail. So we're going to use a lot of that, or we're going to give that a decent amount of the map. These are that's the arm, and sorry, this is the top of the, I'm getting lost here. So that's my top of the head, and I'll just put it near the head just to make life easier. And then this is the neck. So we'll take our neck and put it down here. Oop. Like I said, organizationally, this will just make life a little easier. Arms taking up a little bit too much space. And keep in mind, this is all relative, right? Like if you know, just because it looks like you're not giving a lot of space to something doesn't mean that you're not giving a lot of space to something. Because, you know, if you're using a map that's 4,000 pixels across, you know, each, you know, that's 1,000 pixels to do or that's 2 or almost 3,000 pixels to go across the body. So, you know, it's laying these things out is, like I said, it's all relative to what you're trying to make important. You know, like I said, the body, and the head being the things that you really want to give yourself lots of real estate for. Okay. So I've shrunk all these down. Now, like I said, what you would do is you would continue on. And, you know, this is perfectly valid. You could stop there. There's nothing saying you need to go on. And lots of times this is the best way to do it. But, you know, oops. You know, keep in mind we also have the arrangement, you know, stuff down, the layout stuff down here, right? So if I click this button, it's going to find a way to arrange it to use as much of the map as it can. The thing here is that, you know, this is the body, and then, you know, here's, let's see, that's the arm. There's the head, there's the top of the head, there's the neck. So it's going to put it wherever it feels like putting it, which once again might be fine, but you know, today I'm just going to make sure that things are together, right?
You should have one more time.
Sure. Sure, I grab all the shells. I'm in shell mode, UV shell mode, and I'm just hitting layout.
Awesome.
That's it, and it's just putting it, like I said, it just runs some algorithms to say, this piece will fit there best, and this piece will fit there best, and that's what it thinks is the best layout for you, right? So essentially what we have here, you know, by doing this is, at least for these 3 pieces, and, you know, we want to continue on to the rest of them, but I don't want you to have to sit here and watch me do all these pieces. that's what you would do, and you would lay them out so that all this stuff is exposed. All your pieces are exposed, and they're in a place that you or in a spot where you want them, and you can get at them. Okay, putting them so that the similar pieces are near each other is just kind of a good way to do it. It's not necessary. You don't have to. You can ignore that. But like I said, if you're going to try and paint this in Photoshop, then you're going to want to be able to figure out what's what really, really easily. Okay, so this is just a good way to do it. So in our assignment, what we're going to do, we would continue on, and we would do the other arm, we would do the hands, we would do this little chunk right here, the little hips area, waist area, and then we do both legs. Okay. We actually could probably just do one set of each of these and mirror them over, since it's the same object. In fact, I would definitely do that. I'm not going to today, or for now, just to be able to move on. So okay. So I have these three pieces mapped. I've got them so that every piece is at its own unique piece of the map. And what I'm going to do is kick out a UV snapshot to show you how we can start messing with it, just in the sort of the simplest way, right? So I'm going to make we'll say 3,500 pixel map, 3,500 by 3,500. Okay. I'm going to select PNG this is what I did before. I'm going to choose black actually how about red for the line color. Okay. We're just going to do that. Okay. And then I just have to choose where I want to put that. So I'm going to put it in today's class. There we go. I'll call it, call it 3-part map, right? 3-part map. Oops. Map. Okay. Save. Apply. Got to be in object selection mode. Sorry. So I'm going to select my objects. 1, 2, 3. Apply and close. There we go. So if I come over here to class 20, I should have, what did I call it? 3-part map. Okay. So you can barely see them, but they're in there. So I'm going to come over to Photoshop. And I'm going to open that map. We saw one of these before. Okay. 3-part map. Okay. So in the simplest way, let me put a color behind there. Solid color. Go black. Put it behind the thing. So I don't know if you can see. Here, let me zoom in. So here's the map that we laid out, and here are the lines on its own layer, right? So now I know where all this stuff is. I can do a very, very basic paint. So I'll just grab, put another layer on there. Does everybody here know Photoshop? What's people's okay. All right. Well, bear with me then. This is Photoshop. Welcome to Photoshop. It's just a painting program, that does a bunch of different. It does a whole lot of things, really. Manipulating photos, of course, and all the things that people say when they say they're gonna Photoshop something. That's what they're talking about. So, since we know that this area right here is the top of the head, I'm just gonna color it yellow real quick, and and then we know this is part of the head too. So I'm just gonna come in here and really quickly slop this in there. And then that's the arm on the side here. Okay. So once again, this is the sort of quick and dirty way, or sort of non-3D painting way to make a texture like this. Okay. So like I said, because I know that I know that in the middle here is where my face is going, and I can I could go back to Maya and find out what faces those actually are. Okay, so if I was going to put my face here, I literally grab the polygons that I want to sort of be at, and I can find them. I can find them on the map. Okay, so these are the ones that compromise where you would map the face on, maybe even a little higher. So, you know, it's sort of about in the middle, and it's 4 up by 4 down. Okay. This will all make this will all seem a whole lot easier when we get into Mudbox. So bear with me here. I'm just trying to do a bit of an exercise here. So we're about here. I'd say right about there. So I'm gonna choose another color. Just put a smile. So 4 by 4. That's close enough. Okay. So I'm gonna go back to my colors. This was an arm, right? So I'm gonna just color this another. I'm gonna color this red and or blue because it's got red lines. So you want to make sure, you know, if I go in here, I'm going to start painting on the, I'm going to be putting a texture on the head, right? So we don't want that. So I'm not going to do that. Okay, just make sure I go around. Now, you remember that, so the black areas outside of there are sort of a no man's land, so there's nothing, you know, there's no reason I can slop off the edges here and not have to worry about it, because all this black area isn't being used for anything right now in our map, because we don't have anything to put there. So then the chest, I'm gonna make like just a green, okay? So that's all this area here. As I paint on it, you can see the mesh underneath it, okay? And one way to make sure that your texture is working properly, or sort of it's not stretching and things like that, is to use I like to use circles, because you know you can really spot a circle that doesn't look right really quickly. So I'm going to go in and put a circle on the chest area. So I'll go like that. So that's just a selection, and then paint the inside of that selection. Okay. So I'm going to export this, but I'm going to leave the wire on so that you can see, you know, how that's mapping on back onto the object. Jeez. Oh. There we go. Okay. So File, Save As. I'm going to make another one, PNG. 3-part map.
So we want to make all these maps in paint just because they're easy to import.
Yeah, it's just a good file format, because it's you know, reasonably light. It doesn't add a lot of compression like JPEGs add a lot of compression, but it also supports alpha channels, meaning like, you know, you can have transparent backgrounds and things like that. Okay, so it's just a good sort of all-around useful file format, you know. So if I come back over here and I make a new material to throw on those pieces, okay, and I call that file that I just called shader, there it is, standard surface, and so I'm just going to put it in the base. Now, you know, and a good practice too is, I don't know if you noticed when I went to save it, I called it diffuse, because that's going to be my diffuse base color. So it just, you know, by calling it what it is at the end, you don't get confused, because you may have other maps that do other things, you know, like control the amount of reflection and things like that. So if you put a suffix at the end that calls out what it is, you'll, you know, like I said, it'll make life a lot easier for you. So okay, so I call that up, and it's gonna translate it for a second. Color. Oh wait, shit! I put it in the wrong thing. Sorry. Diffuse. That was the alpha. Sorry about that. I plugged it into the amount, not the color. So turn that off. There we go. Okay, so now we just have a very simple, you know, material that's calling our color, and we'll select our pieces. If it crashes, I'm gonna lose my shit, I gotta admit. Okay, let's try it again. Select my pieces, all 3 of them, right click on my surface, assign material surface, object mode, 1, 2, 3. I'll just drag and drop it on there. This may be overriding it. There we go. Oh, my surface. So we've colored it. Okay. So you see, I still have a nice perfect circle on the body because we use projection mapping versus unfolding. The head's looking fairly decent. I was able to sort of find my way to put the art on there. I didn't do any other colors, so it colored things properly, which it did better. But I think you see, now I have kind of a roadmap as to, whoops. A roadmap as to where things are supposed to go. And by keeping this as another layer, I can turn it off, and now I just get textures. So that's why PNG is good for this, because it comes in with an alpha channel, meaning a transparency channel, so it overlays over the top of it so that I can turn it off. So I kept it on there so that we can just sort of see it on the object. So we're kind of, let me see if I can, so if I turn off my, oh, I don't have it on there. So these lines that you're seeing on there are the actual, the texture being put back on the text on the object. So it's showing you that they're lining up exactly where they're supposed to. Because when we turn on the actual lines, we get those. We're getting the same line. So to make a correct one, correct map, I turn off that guide layer, and then just save it back out. It's the same thing. Diffuse. So I'm just replacing it. Come back over to Maya. Uh-oh. Says it's saving. Anyways, when it saves, it will not have that on there, and it should update itself. So, okay, so like I said, we've got these pieces in there. They're laid out probably. Oh, okay, I see. It doesn't want to allow me to save because Maya has got it tied up, so I can just make another one to get rid of it. Okay. I don't know why it's taking so long to save a file. So I can just call the other one. And if you know what the name is, you don't even need to. I can just type it in here. When it's done, it'll work. There we go. Go back to Maya and O2. Oh, for gosh sakes, what's your problem? Preview button. Okay. There we go. So now the lines are gone, and you see what's going on here. Okay. There we go. So we've colored these pieces. So to make whatever you want to map on the surface, you now, because you have this, you know where it's at, and you could put it on there without any without a lot of issues. So like I said, this is the Photoshop method. Okay. So this is the pure sort of I'm just going to use Photoshop to do this sort of thing. The other tool that we have available to us is Mudbox, okay? And this is Autodesk's 3D both sculptor and painter, and it's pretty decent. So you can play with it to do some of this, to do what we're talking about. To do this sort of assignment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the pieces that I want to push over to Mudbox, okay? Once again, we're all set here. We want to make sure that everything's fine, and my UVs are set up properly, because once you start painting, that's gonna sort of get locked in there. So if you made changes to the UVs, they're not gonna match anymore because of the maps that you're making, right? So like I said, you would continue on map or dupe over the arm and the hand and the body and all that stuff, and then get everything all set up so everything's all nice and exposed here, 1-to-1, okay? So they have like a nice little link here where you just say send to Mudbox. You can send it as a new scene, right? And it'll actually connect up to Mudbox. Let's see here, complete UV set. So what it's saying is something that I selected doesn't have UVs yet, or it's incomplete. I think it basically sent over. So I'm just gonna, I think I'm gonna say delete this mesh. Oh, it didn't bring. Oh, because of the top of the head. So it freaked out because of the top of that little inner bit isn't mapped, so it didn't do that. So I'm gonna come back to. So it actually, so it obviously warns you when something's not quite right. So I'm gonna actually say keep this mesh. So there we go. So it brings in my object. Now, you know, we played around a little bit with this, and you know, so it's a sculptor by, you know, by default.
Can you shout out import one more time?
Sure.
Sorry.
No problem. It's okay. There's a few different options where you can send things to. You can send things to Max, Motion Builder, Mudbox, right? So I'm sending as a new scene. Okay. So, you know, I'm gonna sort of act like I didn't already do the Photoshop part and just sort of ignore that and just sort of go through the workflow if you're using Mudbox on its own. And like I was saying, you know, you can, you know, mess up the object, you know, you can sculpt on the object, but its other half of this is it's a paint tool too, right? So you can color, you know, live right on the object, okay? And there's a bunch of great tools to help you do that. Now I'll show you what we're talking about here. Okay, so I'm gonna hit my paintbrush tool. All right, and so what I'll get is, you know, a paintbrush, and so this is where your Wacom or whatever is gonna help you out, or if you have one of these snazzy monitors that paints right on the object, you can do that. Okay. Over here, you have your options for the current tool. Okay, a color, obviously. The color can be open and kept open the whole time, which is awesome, so that you can keep getting new, you know, keep changing up your color. You've got your size of your brush, which is for some reason always humongous. Like this is according to this, that's 0.3, and then your strength is always way too high too. So strength means transparency. So if I hit 50, it's gonna only paint half the color. Okay, so first thing happens when you click on an object that isn't set up in Mudbox is you get this, create a new paint layer, right? So I'm gonna say Lego Man, I'm gonna give it a name, Lego Man Diffuse, because that's what we're gonna paint. Okay, asks you for a size. Remember in Maya when I typed in 3500, same thing here. It's basically asking you what size you want your map to be. 2,000 pixels, 4,000, or 8,000, or any of these teeny tiny ones, right? So I'm gonna say 4. I'm gonna say PNG again, and then it's gonna paint in the diffuse channel. Notice you have all these channels available to you, right? So the cool thing about Mudbox is that you can paint multiple channels in Mudbox and see what it's gonna do on the object before you get back to Maya, meaning we know what specular is, right? Specular is the amount of reflection on an object. Gloss, incandescence, what they mean by that is how much light it's giving off. Opacity, you can paint a bump map and blah, 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 okay? So, like I was saying, the cool thing about this is that you can paint and see in the viewport what you're gonna get. Take those maps when you're done, go over to Maya, plug them into your shader, and get those results out of there. Okay, so painting color is just one thing that we can do here, right? So, and that's all we're gonna be concerned with today. So, like I said, you can paint all these different layers at the same time in Mudbox, and then, you know, like I said, and see what they're doing. You know, within reason. It's not gonna be exactly the same, but then and then go over to Maya and plug those in there and use them in the real renderer. So diffuse, they mean color, you know. So I'm just gonna hit OK. Let's give it a second. So over here you'll see it's made so I called it Lego Man Diffuse right here. Okay. You can also have layers just like Photoshop in Mudbox. Okay, so you know, if you wanted to paint a base color and then paint graphics on top and another layer so that they're not together, you know, sort of sewn together or married together, you can do that. You can also, you know, sort of choose how you would like them to be put on there, all kinds of stuff like that. Okay, so Mudbox, moving an object around acts just like Maya. So I'm just holding down Alt and I'm hitting my left mouse button to rotate it, and, you know, middle to move it, and then right to zoom, right? If yours isn't behaving that way, it's something you set up in the options, right? You can choose, let's see, where the hell is it? Keys, your preferences. Where is it? Paths, user interface. What's new? Oh, crap. Well, anyway, somewhere in here, if you're, like I said, if your machine isn't acting that way and you'd like it to, just come see me and I'll dig it out of there. But it's in here somewhere. But it should be very familiar to you. So all right. So, you know, by default, when you come in here, all you're going to do is so I've set up a texture, okay, that I'm going to be painting to, okay. I've selected a color and I've selected a brush size. So if I take my brush here, I can start painting right on the object. So this is exactly what I was, sorry. So this is what I was telling you about. So we remember, you know, you remember when I just unwrapped this, these faces and the top are, you know, sort of, they're attached to each other. So it makes total sense that these guys would be able to, you know, I could paint from here to there, right? But remember, here, these faces are flipped up, and in fact, we can see them. There's a UV view here. So see, these guys are, oops, hold on. There we go. Oh, there we go. There we go. So we have a seam here, right? We, you know, so this seam is this part of the mesh, right? So, you know, but Mudbox is handling that so that I can paint and go from seam to seam. See that? So if I come back over to UV view, see that's where that is, but it handled it, right? So if you went to paint that in Photoshop without a 3D painting program, it'd be next to impossible for you to paint like this and paint up here and get those to match perfectly. You know, it's probably is completely impossible, but I can paint across boundaries with Mudbox and it looks right. So that's kind of the, you know, that's the miracle of 3D painting, is that it's handling all that sort of unfolding and remapping properly so that you don't have to worry about it so much, okay? So paint, like I said, painting seams, especially when you go to the rear of the object, you know, is, like I said, next to impossible, but see, it just handled all that. Oh wait, that seam's still continuous. It's this seam that's not continuous. So being able to go like this, and then now I'm on a new map is, you know, like I said, it's a minor miracle, so it's pretty cool. So you don't have to deal with any of that stuff, okay? So, so like I said, by default, you're just basically throwing down color, and you can, you know, you can choose all the colors that you want, and we're painting into our diffuse layer, which is our, you know, our color layer, okay? You can do anything you want here, and, you know, whatever, okay? But then you got lots of other little doodads available to you, right? The first one being stamp down here, which these are all down here. You see this? See the stamp browser at the bottom here? Let me see if I can make these bigger. I cannot. And all that stamps are is exactly what you think. They're just sort of like brushes, right? So if I select this one, you'll see it shows up over here. So when I paint, it's painting little sort of streaks on there. So this would be good for like scratched edges, right? So let me, like that, okay. Scratchy, 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 scratchy. Okay, and there's tons of them. So there's like cloudy stuff. Like if you're trying to, let me get a bigger brush. So this is the brush area right here. Okay, so bigger brush. Whoops. See what I mean? This, I don't know. It's always been like this. Like everything over 1 is like humongous, and it doesn't really want to play nice. So I'm gonna go back up to 100%. Okay. You know, and whatever you want to do, like, you know, like the ones that are kind of cooler are the ones that are a little rougher to, so you kind of put interesting textures on there. Now, granted, this being a Lego guy, you know, like, you know, the art is a little more, you know, just flat and 2D, but I think you get the idea. If you wanted to make something a little more, you know, something that needed to be more detailed, here's how you would do it, you know. So yeah, so like I said, there's a ton of them here. There's these kind of things, it's like just kind of wispy stuff for, you know, painting wear. Yeah, paint all this stuff. Get some colors. You know, paint around the object. kind of weird when it's like you got to use your mouse and the thing. So if you don't have a Wacom tablet, you know, now would be kind of a good time to pick one of these guys up, because you can, I'm sure you can see like what a, you know, how valuable this would be. I mean, you can do it with a mouse, and sometimes that's perfectly fine. It's just a little harder to get it more, you know, to make sort of subtle changes to stuff. Okay. So it's, like I said, it's pretty useful at this point. Okay. Okay. Now, the other thing that you can do is they also have they have stencils, so you can. Oh, sorry. And by the way, also you can bring in any stamp that you want. Like if you have something you already like, or you know, you can go collect these up. You know, these are just the default ones that come with the program. You know, and you can use them to your heart's content. You know, but you can also import your own here, right? So add stamp, and you just basically get a thing to choose an image, and it'll you know, figure it out. So you do PNGs and GIFs and all these old formats, you know. So you can add your own. Okay. So the second thing is a stencil is kind of cool in that it so it shows this sort of overlay, right? And it's treating it literally like a stencil, right? So now when I go to paint, so I'm gonna turn off my stamp, go to my stencil, and I'm just gonna I'm gonna put down like a red color, right? So you'll see it disappears, right? Oops, hold on. It's lagging behind on me. Okay, so it disappears, but you'll see what it's doing. So everywhere where it's white, it's not applying it, right? So if you have like and you sort of pose your object to how you want to apply it. So like if you have if you had fish scales texture, you see how you kind of like shoot through this. And you can also, if you look at the bottom left here, you can move it around if you wanted to. Like S and middle mouse button will actually allow me to. I can place it, and you can rotate and scale it. Okay. So like say if you had like a drippy rust map thing, you know, in black and white that you wanted to. In fact, they probably have one in here somewhere. Yeah, that's kind of a shitty. There we go. So that's kind of a messy. Okay. So I'm going to take and pose, put my object behind it, and then I'm just going to, I'm going to like do some fake rust drips here, right? So, oh wait, this is, yeah, no, wait, that's right, okay. Okay, and then move it over to the corner to kind of put it there. And maybe zoom out so that, zoom in so they get smaller. Put it on the side. So it's literally a stencil. You know, it's masking off like part of the object, so that it controls you know, how you're painting. Okay. Okay. So there's that. So that's just whatever color that's masking off whatever color that you're. That you've got. I wonder if I can flip it. No, I can't flip it. But I can choose a different one. Like here's another grungy one for just some scrapes and stuff. So when I do that. So cool. Okay. And then to turn it off, just go to off like that. So you see some of the things you have available to you, you know, and there's a few other things that you can do here, and I'm not going to mess with those, but those are just the very basic you know, very basic tools you have to sort of control the ink or the color or whatever you want to call it that you're putting down there, right? But another great one that you have that's away from the paint tools is the projection tool, right? So the projection tool allows you to take a texture, including its color, and put it on the object, okay? This is a great way to put decals on where if your object is very regular and straight like this is, but your map isn't, right? If you unfolded everything and it's all janked up, and now if if you're over in Photoshop and you can't paint straight anymore because the lines are all over the place, this gets around that, right? So I've selected my projection tool, okay, and let's see. I think you get it. Sorry. With a stencil, sorry, yeah, it's a stencil, right? So now I'm going to load up. I'm going to load up a stencil, meaning any image, right? So go, okay, In fact, I should be able to just use one of my preview pane. Pizza guy, that guy, that guy. Somebody's got to be straight on. Oh yeah, how about this guy? Okay, so now, so it's gonna, so if I select it, so it shows it in the background, right? So essentially, you're just rubbing that on there. So now, if I move my object to sort of get it in line with where it should be, or I'll tell you what, I'm going to scale this up. See at the bottom corner here, it says scale. Hold down S and right mouse button. So I'm going to scale it up because I'm just trying to get it on the body. So you can see the body behind it, right? Oh, it matches up like that. Okay. Now when I paint, it'll disappear, but it'll rub it right onto the object, and it'll, you know, see, you got to be careful though, because you see how if I went too far, it started showing me the edge, right? So to get this on there, I would just do the bulk of it that I want to rub on there. Okay. Then go back to my painting tools, turn off my stencil. Eyedropper tool will grab that color. I'm gonna shrink that down, and then just paint. Oops. I'm just painting it on. Yeah, there we go. So just paint the rest of it to the edges and all that stuff. But you see, it's now exactly where it should be on the object. It's maybe a little off center, but I think you get the idea. So this allows you to correct those kind of problems, but also use real life photographs to do all kinds of great, really cool stuff, because it's going to be really organic. So this is a great place to collect up good texture reference and things like that. There's tons of it out there and everything. So it's like if you bring these in, you can like I said, you can put on really wrap wood textures on there properly. You can have rusty real metal. Instead of trying to fake it and paint it yourself, you can just go get the real thing and essentially rub it on there. Okay, so there we go. Okay, so I'm gonna quit right about there. So okay, let me put a face on it. That's too big. 0.05 there. Too big. 0.02. Okay, so now once again, like what we can do now is I can get these textures out of here, and I can export it. You can kick them out to PSD, but sort of the easiest way is to, or not the easiest way, but so the best way is to just do them by hand. I like to do them by hand just so that they make sure they get over there. So if I right click, so here's my diffuse texture, okay, the one that we painted for the color, okay. Right click, export selected. It's going to ask you where to put it. Now, obviously you got to be real careful where you're putting it, or you're going to lose it. So I'm going to call it Lego Space Man Diffuse 01 PNG. So it's going to do all the sort of unwrapping and unprojecting, or if that's a word, unproject. Yeah, I guess so. And I called it Lego Spaceman Diffuse. So there it is. Okay. And as we've seen, like this obviously will wrap just right on the object, because there's the face, there's the all these areas that we've already seen. So if I come back over to Maya and I choose that file, no, give it a second. Give it several seconds. There we go. It wraps on the object properly. Okay. So that's kind of the workflow. So you can save in Mudbox, you can save its own files so that it knows how to sort of set everything up for you. So that's and Mudbox files are going to be separate from Maya files, so you would want to keep those separate. So if you want to jump back in there and paint things, that's how it changes. Or that's how it knows how to set these things up, right? Because you can have all these other channels, which we'll play with another time. All we're really concerned about is painting textures, because since this is plastic, there's no real need to get nuts and be painting all these other channels. But for right now, we'll just paint this one channel and we're good. So, but you see, when you bring it over here, it maps on perfectly, and we painted all these crazy areas and did all this stuff, and I think there are lights. So let's see how it turned out. But it's fun because once it's set up, painting on the object is the fun part, like setting up the UV parts is the shitty part, and then the fun part is kind of being able to paint it any way you like. And especially if you're doing something that that does have a lot of little variance and you're trying to put little details in there and stuff like that, it can be a lot of fun. So, but yep, there we go. So it's interesting, it did map, you notice how this is black. So since where I didn't paint, it's going to black because there's an alpha channel in this image. So if I open it up in Photoshop, look at Spaceman here, you'll see it's got transparency, right? So that's why it's black. So either I want to go in and I want to paint all, at least paint all of it something, or I need to tweak this up in Photoshop so I get something out of it. So the deal is that this would allow me to layer just those pieces on. That's what we're talking about when we talk about images with an alpha channel. That, like, you can do layering. So I could have a base color and just put the decals on separately and not have to worry about painting the whole thing if I didn't want to, or I could have multiple maps, and we won't, like, that complicates things, but that's basically what's happening here. So you want to give something, you want to give every piece at least a little bit of color. Okay, so I think so. Yeah, I hope that makes sense. I think you see how why it's important to why we laid these things out and why it's not the way that we did. But you can also see how the flexibility that you can get as long as you have something like Mudbox to fix this kind of stuff if these things weren't straight. Since we did it straight, it behaved perfectly. If we didn't, we'd have to sort of deal with it a little bit. Okay. So that's a lot of what I wanted to, like I said, there's more to Mudbox, obviously, but just from a sort of a quick overview, it feels and behaves a lot like Maya, which is awesome, so you'll know how to, get around your object and things like that. All we're really concerned about is the paint tool tab right here, and honestly, we're you can, if you want to play with the other pieces, or the other tools, then, help yourself. There's it's basically a mini Photoshop, but on objects. So you get there's a lot of stuff to play with, but it's really Stamp and Stencil that are your big buddies right here, and then your Paint and your Projection tool are also really important. So that's basically the idea. So if you go online, they're in Canvas, there's an assignment where you get this model. It's not mapped. You map it yourself. Definitely go in and do half of it and then mirror the pieces over to save yourself time. But you saw how we did most of it already. We did some of the hardest parts. The hand might be a little tougher, but I wouldn't sweat it too much because it mainly just needs to be colored. So if you can kind of get it mostly torn apart, will be good. But the arms, you might want to be able to put decals on like they do, like on the legs, some of them on the arms, they have stuff. Not that guy, not that guy, that guy. Yeah, see here one they printed all over the place. So they're mainly just projected this way, and then they're wrapped around the head, and they're actually projected in all directions on the legs too. But I highly doubt on the back because it actually just has a bunch of holes in the back, so that clicks onto other things. So you don't need to worry about that either too much. I would lay it out so that you could mess with it, but that's basically the gist of it. So if we can set those up, the idea is to make a one of these guys that is you. It looks like you as much as you possibly can in the idea of or in the style of self-portrait, in the idea or in the style of Lego minifigures. You see, they keep the art very simple, but that's the concept that we want to try and do. So if anybody has any questions, I'll be here, and if nothing else going on, I'll probably be just live demonstrating, tearing apart the rest of it, and setting it up. So, all right. What do I say? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And I'll see you next week.
Like and subscribe.
Yeah, thank you to all the Patreon. Yeah.